What if one day you realized that everyone around you loved everything about you, except you? That was the gnawing thought that had haunted me for years. I had money, power, and influence in Lagos, yet a hollow emptiness lingered in my chest. People saw John Derek, the billionaire, not John Derek, the man. And after decades of wealth and success, I wondered if I would ever know what true love felt like. It was in the middle of this restless night, staring at the glimmering skyline from my penthouse, that a wild, impulsive idea struck me. What if I could experience life from the other side? What if I could see how ordinary people lived, and maybe, just maybe, find someone who loved me for me, not my bank account? The idea made my pulse quicken. By morning, I had a plan. I disguised myself as a poor cleaner, dirty clothes, scuffed shoes, and even a faded cap pulled low to hide my face. It was laughable how easily my staff would dismiss me. After all, no one expected a billionaire to sweep floors and mop corridors in his own hospital. The smell of disinfectant and the constant hum of machines greeted me when I arrived at the hospital early that morning. I felt exposed, almost like I was stepping into a different universe. It was during my first round of cleaning the ICU that I saw her. Susan. She moved with a grace that seemed effortless, her eyes calm but alert as she tended to a frail patient. I had seen nurses before, but there was something about the way she whispered encouragement, held the patient's hand, and yet maintained a quiet authority. It was magnetic. I paused, broom in hand, pretending to adjust the mop bucket, just so I could watch her a little longer. "Hey, watch where you're going," a voice snapped me back to reality. It was another cleaner, a gruff man who clearly didn't trust new faces. I muttered an apology, but my eyes kept returning to Susan. Something told me that if I could get close to her, I might finally glimpse the kind of love that had always eluded me. Little did I know, that very morning would change everything. Susan wasn't just another nurse. She was about to turn my carefully controlled life upside down, and in ways I could never have predicted. As I pushed the mop across the spotless floor, I felt an unfamiliar flutter in my chest, a mix of anticipation and fear. The game was on, and I had no idea if I was ready for the consequences of what I was about to start. I had thought I understood what it meant to feel invisible. Growing up in wealth, surrounded by people who fawned over my every move, I'd never really known what it was like to be unnoticed until that day. As a cleaner, I was invisible. The doctors hurried past me, nurses barely spared me a glance, and patients simply assumed I was another faceless hand keeping the hospital functional. For the first time in my life, I could move without the weight of expectation pressing on my shoulders. But then there was Susan. She seemed to radiate warmth even in the chaos of a busy shift. I watched her check on a patient, a young boy who trembled with fear after surgery. She bent low, gently rubbing his hand. "It's okay, Emeka," she whispered. My heart skipped a beat, but I quickly reminded myself not to stare too obviously. Noticing my pause, she glanced over, but I quickly turned my head, pretending to sweep near the floor. I cursed silently. How could someone so ordinary seem so extraordinary? "New guy," a voice barked from across the corridor. It was Tund, a janitor notorious for being difficult. If you're just standing there daydreaming, the floor isn't going to clean itself. I forced a chuckle. "Yes, sir," I muttered, trying to sound casual, though my hands shook slightly as I gripped the mop. Tund eyed me suspiciously. "You don't seem like a janitor. Where did you even come from?" I shrugged. "Moved here recently. Needed work." It sounded believable enough. No one would expect the truth. No one would guess that I, John Derek, the billionaire who had poured millions into this hospital, was right there, mopping the same floor as him. The day passed in a blur of mopping, scrubbing, and hiding my discomfort whenever someone walked by. But every time I caught a glimpse of Susan, I felt a tug in my chest that I had never felt before. There was something in the way she worked, her patience, her kindness, that made me want to be near her, to know her. I even found myself imagining what it would be like to speak to her, really speak, without the walls my wealth had built around me. During a brief break, I leaned against a corner and watched her laugh with a colleague over something small, a shared joke about a patient's stubbornness. It was a sound I hadn't realized I was missing in my life. I wanted to hear it every day, wanted to be the reason for that laugh, even if she never knew who I really was. As the sun began to dip low, casting warm light into the hospital corridors, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't going to be an ordinary day. Susan had a way of making even the ordinary extraordinary. And as I wiped the last spot of disinfectant off the floor, I realized that this mission, this reckless gamble to find real love, might just be the most important risk I'd ever take. I had expected to blend into the background, to remain invisible, but Susan had a way of noticing people even when they didn't want to be noticed. That afternoon, as I was pushing a cart of soiled linens down a narrow corridor, she appeared, balancing a tray of medication with effortless grace. "Careful," she called, her voice light but firm. "You don't want to trip and spill that all over the floor." I froze for a moment, caught between pretending I hadn't heard her and replying. Thanks," I said finally, forcing a sheepish smile. She raised an eyebrow, amused. "You're new, aren't you?" I hesitated. "Yes, just started today." I didn't add that I was technically the owner of the hospital. At this point, it was safer to keep that part secret. Her lips curved into a gentle smile. "Well, welcome. I'm Susan." She held out a hand, which I shook instinctively, trying not to fumble. Her grip was firm, and I felt an odd thrill run through me. There was no pretense in her eyes, no calculation, just honesty. "John," I mumbled, realizing immediately how dull it sounded compared to the sparkle in her voice. Susan laughed softly. "Just John, huh? Nice and simple. I like that." We walked together briefly down the corridor, and I noticed how she treated everyone with the same calm respect. The janitors, the interns, even the patients who were crying or groaning in pain. She stopped to reassure a frightened child, whispering, "You're safe here, don't worry." I watched her hands, how gentle and careful they were, and something inside me twisted. How could someone be so giving in a world that often felt so cruel? "Do you always clean with such enthusiasm?" she teased as I bent to pick up a dropped glove. I laughed nervously. "Enthusiasm? More like survival." She chuckled again, a sound I found myself memorizing, and I realized I had been holding my breath. "You're funny," she said lightly, and I felt a spark I hadn't felt in years. Funny. The word seemed so simple, yet it struck me profoundly. She didn't know my wealth, my status, or my life outside these walls, and yet she was treating me like I mattered. The day dragged on, but the moments with her made time feel warped, stretched in a way that was almost intoxicating. I found myself looking for excuses to pass by her station, to hear her voice, to see that effortless kindness. By the end of my shift, when I finally removed my disguise in the staff locker room, my reflection stared back at me, messy hair, stained shirt, and an unfamiliar warmth in my chest. Susan had no idea who I really was, and yet I was already beginning to care too much. For the first time in my life, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, love wasn't something you found in grand gestures or expensive gifts. Maybe it was right here, in laughter, in kindness, in small, shared moments. And I knew I was willing to risk everything to discover if Susan could be the answer I'd been searching for all along. The next morning, I returned to the hospital with a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. My disguise was in place, my face hidden under the cap and grime of a cleaner's uniform. Walking through the gleaming halls of my own hospital, I felt oddly disconnected from the man I usually was, the billionaire, the one everyone knew. Here, I was just John, anonymous, unnoticed, and yet, alive in a way I hadn't been for years. Susan was already at the nurse's station, organizing charts with meticulous care. She looked up as I passed, a small smile lighting her face. "Good morning, John. Ready for another exciting day of cleaning?" I chuckled, trying to hide the racing of my heart. As ready as I'll ever be, I said, pushing my mop along the floor. You're improving, she teased. Yesterday, you almost didn't spill the mop bucket. Almost. Her laughter was infectious, and I caught myself grinning, feeling lighter than I had in years. There was something about the ease of our conversation, the casual banter that felt both natural and dangerous. Dangerous because every word, every glance, drew me deeper into something I wasn't sure I was ready for, falling for a woman who had no idea who I really was. During a break, I found myself helping her carry a stack of medical supplies to one of the wards. You don't have to do that, she said, raising an eyebrow at me. I insist, I replied with a grin, lifting the box carefully. Besides, someone has to keep you from breaking your back with all this heavy lifting. Susan laughed softly. You're too kind, John. Most people here would just rush past without even noticing the effort. We moved together through the ward, and I felt a strange thrill at the closeness of it, the small touches, the shared smiles, the comfortable silence between tasks. There was no pretense, no judgment. Just two people working side by side, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere entirely different from the world I knew. By mid-afternoon, I began noticing subtle changes among the staff. A few of the older nurses glanced at me with suspicion, whispering behind hands, while a couple of interns seemed curious about the new cleaner who appeared so eager and oddly observant. I caught snippets of their conversations. Did you see the way he watches the patients? Yeah, and he's strangely attentive for a janitor. I suppressed a laugh. They had no idea who I really was. No one did, and part of me thrilled at the thought of being able to watch everything unfold unnoticed, like an invisible guardian. As Susan administered medication to a patient in room 7, she glanced at me with genuine warmth. Thank you for helping today, John. You really made a difference. Her words struck me in a way I hadn't expected. Making a difference. That was all I wanted, yet I also realized I wanted something more, her, completely without disguise or deceit. Walking back to the supply closet after the shift, I felt the tug of anticipation. The days ahead would test my patience, my restraint, and perhaps my heart. Susan had no idea that the man she joked and laughed with while pushing a mop cart was the same man who had built this hospital from the ground up. And I knew, deep down, that when she discovered the truth, nothing would ever be the same. By the 5th day of my undercover experiment, I was beginning to feel the weight of the life I had created for myself. Sweeping floors, carrying dirty linens, and scrubbing bathroom tiles, these tasks were nothing compared to the emotional whirlwind Susan stirred inside me. Every glance, every smile, every word she offered carried a subtle pull that I couldn't ignore. I was supposed to be invisible, detached, but I was failing spectacularly. That morning, as I mopped the corridor near the maternity ward, Susan appeared with a bundle of newborn blankets in her arms. John, she called gently, would you help me get these to room 12? I hurried to her side, careful not to trip over the mop bucket. Of course, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. As we walked, I noticed her eyes light up when she spoke to the tiny infants. I've always wanted to work with babies, she admitted quietly. They're so fragile, yet so resilient. They teach you patience you never knew you had. I wanted to say something profound, something that would reveal the truth of what I felt, but I held my tongue. Instead, I nodded, feeling an ache in my chest. They are amazing, I murmured. You can tell you care about them. Susan's smile lingered on her lips, warm and genuine. Thanks, John. That means a lot. Later that day, I overheard whispers among the staff that made my heart pound. Have you noticed how he seems to understand things about the hospital, things a cleaner shouldn't? One nurse murmured. Yeah, another replied. Almost like he's more than he seems. I fought the urge to reveal myself right then and there. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. The more I spent time with Susan, the more I feared the moment she might uncover my secret. How could I tell her that the man she trusted and laughed with was, in reality, The billionaire who owned the very hospital she devoted her life to. During lunch, Susan and I found ourselves alone in the staff break room. She poured herself some tea and glanced at me. "You seem different from the others. More attentive. Do you always notice the small things?" I swallowed hard. "I try. Someone has to, right?" I forced a casual shrug, though my heart was racing. "It helps me feel connected." She looked at me for a long moment, and I thought I saw a flicker of curiosity in her eyes, the same curiosity I felt for her. "Interesting, John," she said softly, almost shyly. The word struck me deeper than I expected. Interesting. It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was enough to ignite hope, a dangerous, exhilarating hope that I might really have a chance with her, despite the lies I carried. As the day ended, I returned to the locker room to shed my disguise, but my reflection in the mirror looked different to me now. I wasn't just John Derrick, the billionaire, anymore. I was someone caught between two worlds, the man I had always been and the man I wanted to become for her. And the risk of falling in love while hiding the truth had never felt so real. The next morning, I felt a strange mix of excitement and anxiety as I walked through the hospital doors. My disguise was simple, but it carried an unfamiliar weight now. Every step, every glance from Susan made my chest tighten, and I couldn't help but replay our brief conversations from the previous day. Susan was already in the ICU, checking charts and speaking softly to a patient recovering from surgery. Her focus, her kindness, it was mesmerizing. As I quietly began sweeping near the nurse's station, she glanced at me and smiled. "Good morning, John. Ready for another day of hard work?" I grinned, trying to sound nonchalant. "Absolutely. Can't let these floors get the better of me." Her laughter, warm and genuine, hit me like a wave. I found myself lingering near her, noticing the way she interacted with everyone, patients, doctors, even the support staff. There was an honesty about her that I'd never experienced before. She didn't see me as a billionaire or a man of status. She saw me as a person, even if she thought I was just a humble cleaner. But not everyone was as trusting. During a brief break, I noticed two of the senior nurses whispering as they watched me carry a stack of linens. "Why is he always around her?" one murmured. "I don't know," the other replied. "It's like he's paying more attention than he should." I froze momentarily, my pulse quickening. If they started questioning me, it could jeopardize everything. I had to tread carefully. Later, as I pushed a mop down a long corridor, Susan approached, holding a tray of medications. "John, could you help me deliver these to the patient in room 9? "Of course," I said, lifting the tray. Our hands brushed briefly, and I felt an electric jolt run through me. I fought to hide it, focusing on the task at hand. As we entered the room, Susan kneeled beside the patient, gently explaining the medicine. "It's important to take this on time, okay?" she said softly. I watched the tenderness in her eyes, the patience in her voice. "You really care, don't you?" I asked quietly, unable to resist. She looked up at me, slightly startled, and smiled. "I do. I try to." Her words were simple, yet they struck me deeply. Here was someone who gave without expecting anything in return. Someone whose heart was pure. But as we left the room, I noticed a flicker of suspicion in her eyes, not directed at me, but toward the other staff. I realized that my presence, my insistence on helping her, might start raising questions. And the thought of Susan doubting me even slightly filled me with unease. Walking back to the supply closet, I pushed the mop with more force than necessary, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I couldn't let suspicion grow. Not now, not when my feelings for her were becoming impossible to ignore. Susan had unknowingly captured my heart, and I was walking a tightrope. One misstep and everything could crumble. By the time my shift ended, I was exhausted in a way money and power had never made me. It wasn't the physical labor, it was the emotional strain of being near her, hiding the truth, and fearing what might happen if anyone discovered my secret. And yet, I knew I couldn't stop. I had to see her, to know her, even if it meant risking everything. The next day felt heavier than usual. I couldn't shake the thought that someone might be watching me too closely, observing the way I lingered around Susan, or noticing how I seemed to know more about the hospital than a cleaner should. Still, I forced myself to focus on the work. Sweeping floors, wiping counters, moving linen carts, mundane tasks that suddenly felt like the most important mission of my life. Susan was at the nurse's station when I arrived, her brow furrowed in concentration as she reviewed patient charts. "Good morning, John," she said softly, looking up from the stack of papers. "Would you help me sort these medications?" "Of course," I said, stepping forward. There was a thrill in seeing her rely on me, even in these small tasks, as if I were part of her world. As we worked side by side, she glanced at me, curiosity dancing in her eyes. "You know, most people don't care about the details. But you notice everything. It's impressive." I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I guess I just like things to be right," I replied casually, hoping my tone didn't betray the truth. She smiled, a soft, genuine curve of her lips that made my heart ache. "You're good at this, John." "Really?" It was in that moment I realized how dangerous this was becoming. I was falling for her, hard, and yet she had no idea who I truly was. And I could see it in the subtle way she trusted me, included me, spoke to me. Trust, I thought, was more fragile than glass. One wrong move and it could shatter completely. During a brief pause, Susan leaned back against the counter and sighed. "I sometimes wonder if people even notice the effort we put in," she said quietly. "The little things, the hours we spend making sure patients feel safe, it can feel invisible." I felt an ache in my chest, a pang of guilt and longing. "I notice," I said softly, and then immediately chided myself. That was too much, too revealing. But when I looked at her, really looked at her, I couldn't help it. "I really do." She turned her gaze toward me, studying me for a moment, and a shadow of curiosity passed across her features. "You're sincere, John. I can tell." The words were simple, but they carried a weight I hadn't expected. Sincere. It was everything I wanted to be, but everything I couldn't fully be, not yet. I was hiding behind a mask, pretending to be someone I wasn't, and yet she was starting to trust me. As the day went on, I noticed small glances from other staff members. Whispers, questioning looks, a subtle sense of suspicion growing among the nurses and janitors. I realized I had to be more careful, to navigate the delicate balance between being near Susan and keeping my true identity hidden. By the time the shift ended, I was drained, mentally and emotionally, but there was a strange sense of satisfaction. Susan had unknowingly welcomed me into her world, and I had taken the first tentative step into hers. Walking to the locker room, I removed the disguise and looked at my reflection. The man staring back at me was tired but alive. Alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. And as I glanced at my phone, I realized I was already thinking about tomorrow, about her, about us, and about the impossible gamble I was taking for a chance at love. By the 8th day, I realized the hospital staff were beginning to notice me more than I had anticipated. Subtle glances, whispered conversations behind my back, and the occasional raised eyebrow, all signs that my cover wasn't as airtight as I had hoped. I had to be careful. Every word, every gesture mattered, especially around Susan. I couldn't afford to risk losing her trust. That morning, I found her in the pediatric ward, kneeling beside a child who was afraid of the 4-needle. "It's okay, darling," she whispered, gently holding his hand. "I'm right here. You won't feel a thing." I watched from a few steps away, pretending to tidy the floor, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. There was something hypnotic about the way she moved, the calm strength she radiated. "I wish I could be that brave," I murmured under my breath. Susan glanced up, catching my voice. "What was that?" I quickly straightened, forcing a casual tone. "Nothing, just talking to myself," I said, hoping she'd buy it. She raised an eyebrow but smiled anyway. "You're funny, John. I like that about you." My heart leapt at her words, but there was a twinge of fear too. Funny? Liked? Those small affirmations were dangerous. They drew me closer to her, made me long for more, and reminded me constantly of the lie I was living. Later, during lunch, I overheard a few nurses whispering in the break room. "Do you think he's really a cleaner?" one asked. "I don't know, he acts too knowledgeable about the hospital," another replied. My stomach tightened. I had been careful, but now suspicion was spreading. I knew I had to keep my interactions with Susan natural, while also being mindful of the growing curiosity around me. After lunch, Susan came to the supply closet where I was organizing sheets. "John, could you help me carry these boxes to the recovery ward?" "Of course," I said, lifting the first box carefully. As we walked, she glanced at me. "You really go out of your way to help everyone. Most people don't notice the small things like you do." I felt a pang in my chest. "I notice because it matters," I admitted softly. "Sometimes the small things make the biggest difference." She looked at me, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You're different, John. I don't know why, but you are." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. Different. Not rich, not a billionaire, just different. She had no idea, but her insight felt too close to the truth, and I knew I had to tread even more carefully. That evening, as I removed my disguise in the locker room, I caught my reflection and couldn't help but smile faintly. Susan was pulling me into her world, trusting me in ways I had never imagined. But the whispers, the suspicion, and the lie I carried were shadows hovering over me. Every day brought me closer to her, but also closer to the risk of losing everything. And yet, for the first time in my life, I felt hope. Real hope. The kind that made you want to fight through fear and lies, if only for a chance at something genuine, something lasting, something like love. That evening, the hospital was quieter than usual. The hum of machines and distant footsteps created a calm rhythm that felt almost comforting. I lingered near the nurse's station, pretending to clean the floor, though my attention was entirely on Susan. She moved gracefully, checking charts, adjusting drips, and whispering softly to patients. I couldn't help but notice how she treated everyone with respect, from the interns to the janitors, and it made my chest tighten with admiration. "John," she called gently, walking toward me with a small stack of patient files. "Can you help me deliver these to room 14? "Of course," I replied, lifting the files carefully. Her hand brushed against mine as I handed her the first folder, and a spark of electricity shot through me. I forced myself to remain calm, focusing on the task rather than the warmth lingering from her touch. As we entered the room, a frail elderly woman looked up at us, her eyes filled with fear. Susan knelt beside her bed, her voice soft and reassuring. "It's okay, ma'am. We're here to help you. Everything will be fine." I watched her, amazed at the patience and kindness she showed. It wasn't just professionalism, it was genuine care, the kind that came from a heart that had known struggle and empathy. I found myself wanting to protect her, to be part of her world, even if it meant keeping my own secret hidden. After leaving the room, Susan glanced at me, a small smile playing on her lips. "You really make this job easier, John. Thank you for helping." I felt a warmth spread through me. "It's nothing," I said softly, though I meant every word. The simple acknowledgement from her felt like a reward I could never have bought. Later, during a brief break, she confided in me quietly, leaning against the counter. "Sometimes I wonder if people even notice the effort we put into our work. The little things, making patients comfortable, keeping them calm, it feels invisible." "I notice," I said before thinking, my voice barely above a whisper. My heart pounded in my chest. "I notice, Susan. You make a difference every single day." She looked at me with something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. A flicker of curiosity, maybe even gratitude. "You're sincere, John. I can tell," she said softly. The words were dangerous and intoxicating. I was falling for her faster than I could control, yet every moment with her deepened my desire to be honest. Still, the whispers and curious glances from the other staff reminded me that my disguise was fragile. One mistake, one slip of truth, and everything could unravel. As I walked to the locker room that evening, I removed the disguise and stared at my reflection. The man staring back at me was exhausted, but alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. Susan was slowly drawing me into her world, her trust a fragile gift I couldn't afford to break. And yet, despite the risk, I knew I was willing to face anything to see where this connection could lead. Tomorrow, I promised myself I would get just a little closer. Just enough to learn more about her heart, and hope, somehow, that she might someday open it to me. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual, my disguise firmly in place. The hospital was quieter than usual, the early sun casting a warm glow across the polished floors. I tried to focus on my work, pushing the mop in steady strokes, but my thoughts kept drifting to Susan. I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she laughed, the way she cared for everyone, even the smallest patients, and the way she made me feel alive in a way money never had. We continued our rounds, delivering medications, checking on patients, and sharing brief conversations that seemed to stretch time. There was a closeness between us now, subtle yet undeniable, and I felt a pull I couldn't resist. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future where I didn't hide behind wealth or status, where I could be fully myself with her. Later, during a short break, Susan confided in me. "Sometimes I feel like people only see what I do, not who I am," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But with you, it feels different. Like you see me." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to tell her the truth, to remove the disguise and show her that the man who had been mopping floors and carrying charts was the same man who had built the hospital. But fear held me back. Fear of losing her, fear of shattering the trust she had placed in me so naturally. Instead, I offered a small smile. "I see you, Susan. I really do," I said softly, hoping it was enough for now. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I carried out my tasks with precision, keeping my distance when necessary, yet savoring every small interaction with her. By the time I removed my disguise in the locker room, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Susan was slowly becoming the center of my world, and I knew the coming days would test my patience, my secrecy, and my heart in ways I had never anticipated. By the 11th day, that morning, I was arranging linen carts near the ICU when I overheard a nurse muttering to a colleague, "Have you noticed John? He's everywhere Susan is, almost like he's following her." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Following her? That was exactly the wrong impression. I forced myself to breathe slowly and kept my movements casual, pretending to mop a nearby floor. Later, Susan appeared, balancing a tray of medications. She smiled warmly at me, and my chest tightened. "Good morning, John. Are you ready to help me with the rounds?" "Absolutely," I said, lifting the tray carefully. Her hand brushed mine again, sending that familiar jolt of electricity through me. As we walked together, I tried to keep the mood light. "I promise I'm not stalking you," I joked quietly, hoping she'd laugh. She looked at me, eyes wide for a moment, then laughed softly. "I didn't think you were," she said. "But some people do seem curious about you." Her words made my stomach twist. She was perceptive, and I knew she could easily misinterpret any subtle hint of suspicion from the staff. I had to protect both my secret and our growing connection. During the rounds, a patient called out in discomfort, and Susan moved immediately to calm her. I helped her adjust the foredrip, silently praising her patience and skill. "You really make this look easy," I said softly. Susan smiled, brushing back a stray strand of hair. "It's not easy, but it's worth it." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words in my chest. Worth it, worth every risk, every lie, every moment of hiding who I really was, just to be near her. But the whispers outside the room continued. I could feel eyes on us, and it made my heart race with anxiety. One careless slip could ruin everything. At the end of the shift, as Susan and I returned the supplies, she glanced at me. "You've been different lately, John. I don't know why, but I like it." Her words were dangerous and intoxicating. Different. But those small affirmations were slowly breaking down the walls I had built around myself. I wanted to tell her the truth, to remove the disguise and let her see everything, but I couldn't risk it, not yet. The morning air in Lagos was thick with humidity, and I felt it pressing down on me even inside the hospital. Today, the weight of my double life felt heavier than ever. Staff whispers were no longer subtle. I could sense eyes following me, evaluating my every movement. And worst of all, Susan, my reason for enduring this charade, was starting to notice subtle oddities in my behavior. I was arranging medical supplies near the recovery ward when she approached, holding a clipboard. "John, I noticed you've been helping almost everywhere today. Are you sure you're not overdoing it?" she asked, her eyes scanning me with genuine concern. I forced a casual shrug, though my heart raced. "I just want to make sure everything runs smoothly," I said. "It's nothing." Susan smiled faintly, but I could see the slight furrow in her brow. Her intuition was sharp, dangerously sharp. She was already beginning to read the man behind the disguise, and I knew I had to be careful. As we moved together down the corridor, delivering charts and adjusting four lines, I kept my attention on the patients and tasks. But a small voice in my head reminded me, one mistake, one slip of the truth, and it could all fall apart. Later, in the staff break room, I overheard a nurse muttering to another, "Have you noticed? He seems to know things he shouldn't. I don't trust him." My stomach knotted. I had to act normal, but I couldn't ignore the tension building around me. When Susan glanced up at me with a warm smile, I felt a surge of protectiveness. "Don't worry about them," I said softly. "Let's focus on our work." She raised an eyebrow, curiosity lingering in her eyes, but she didn't press. Instead, she handed me a small package of sterile gloves. "Thanks, John. You're really dependable, you know." The word dependable struck me harder than any compliment before. She trusted me, and I wanted desperately to protect that trust, even if it meant lying every day. By mid-afternoon, the tension reached a peak. A supervisor approached me, frowning. "John, I need you to explain why you're always in the same ward as Nurse Susan. It's raising questions." I felt my pulse quicken. "But I'm just helping with tasks wherever needed," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I follow the instructions I'm given." The supervisor studied me for a moment, suspicion flickering in his eyes, but he didn't press further. Instead, he muttered, "Make sure you don't overstep." As he walked away, I let out a silent breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Susan caught my eye from across the room, her expression soft, almost knowing. I smiled faintly, but the truth was terrifying. My secret was at risk, and the closer I got to her, the more fragile everything became. When the shift ended, I returned to the locker room, removed my disguise, and stared at my reflection. The man looking back at me was exhausted, anxious, but strangely alive. Susan was pulling me into her world, and I was powerless to resist. But I knew one thing with certainty: the next misstep could change everything. And yet, despite the fear, I couldn't stop. I had to keep going for her, for us, and for a chance at a love I had never known before. That evening, the hospital corridors were quieter, bathed in the soft glow of the late afternoon sun. Most of the patients were resting, and the hustle of the day had slowed. I found myself near the recovery ward again, pretending to wipe down counters, though my eyes kept drifting toward Susan. She moved with effortless grace, checking on charts and quietly reassuring patients. "John, could you help me carry this oxygen tank to room 17? She asked, looking at me with that familiar warmth. "Of course," I said, stepping forward. Her hand brushed mine as I lifted the tank, and a jolt of electricity ran through me. I swallowed hard, focusing on the task to mask the fluttering in my chest. As we reached the room, a patient stirred, groaning softly. Susan knelt beside him, her voice soothing. "It's okay, Mr. Adesina. You're safe." I watched her, captivated by the way she gave her attention fully and completely, even to someone who was unfamiliar to her. I felt an ache inside, a longing to be the one she cared for with such devotion. Once the patient settled, she turned to me with a soft smile. "Thank you for helping, John. I couldn't do it all alone." I felt warmth spread through me. "You don't have to thank me," I murmured. "I want to help." She studied me for a moment, her eyes searching mine. "You're sincere. I can tell. Most people would have given up on this job by now, but you stay, and you notice the things that matter. It's rare." Her words struck me deeply. Rare. That was exactly how I felt about her. I wanted to reach out, to tell her everything, but the secret I carried pressed heavily against my chest. I had to resist, for now, and let our bond grow slowly, naturally. During a quiet moment, she leaned against the wall and spoke softly. "Do you ever feel like you're just wandering through life unnoticed?" Her vulnerability caught me off guard. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I think the right people notice, eventually. They see who you really are." Susan's eyes softened, and for a heartbeat, I felt a connection that went beyond words. I wanted to be that person for her, the one who truly saw her, who protected her, who loved her without condition. The tension in the hospital seemed to fade around us, but I knew it was temporary. Staff whispers and suspicious glances were constant reminders that my disguise could unravel at any moment. Yet, in that quiet hallway, with Susan smiling at me, I felt hope. Real hope. As the shift ended and we parted ways, I returned to the locker room, removed my disguise, and looked at my reflection. Susan had become more than just a fleeting presence in my life. She had become the reason I wanted to be better, to be honest, and to finally find the love I had been searching for all these years. The following morning, a sense of unease hung in the hospital air. Staff whispers were louder, glances sharper, and I could feel eyes tracking my every move. Every time I approached Susan, I noticed subtle looks from colleagues, curious, suspicious, questioning. My heart pounded in my chest. One careless slip could reveal everything. I was pushing a cart of soiled linens when I overheard a nurse muttering to another. "Do you think he's hiding something? He knows too much for a cleaner." I froze for a heartbeat, gripping the cart tighter. My mind raced. I had to act normal, but the tension was suffocating. I had to tread carefully, for Susan's sake and my own. I had to see this through, for Susan, for us, and for a love that might finally be genuine. It was a typical busy afternoon when the unexpected happened. A sudden commotion erupted near the emergency ward, and I instinctively rushed toward the source. A young patient had collapsed, and the staff were scrambling, trying to stabilize him. My heart pounded, not from the physical exertion, but from the fear that this could be the moment that exposed me. Susan was already at the patient's side, her hands steady as she instructed the team. "We need oxygen now. Call Dr. Adeyemi." Without thinking, I stepped in to help, lifting equipment and assisting wherever I could. I stayed close to Susan, matching her movements, anticipating her needs. The fear of being discovered was there, but it was drowned out by the urgency of the moment. "John, hand me the suction tube," she called urgently. I passed it quickly, my hands shaking slightly, and she gave me a brief nod of approval. For a heartbeat, our eyes met, no words, just a silent understanding that we were working together, lives hanging in the balance. The tension in the room was palpable. Nurses barked instructions, doctors moved with precision, and the young patient's breathing stabilized slowly. I kept my focus, doing everything I could to assist, my heart still racing from the adrenaline and from the proximity to Susan. Once the situation calmed, Susan stepped back, wiping sweat from her forehead. She looked at me with something between relief and admiration. "John, you didn't have to do all that," she said softly. "I wanted to help," I replied, my voice hoarse. "I couldn't just stand there." Her eyes searched mine, and I could see a flicker of something deeper: gratitude, trust, maybe even a hint of something more. "You were incredible," she murmured. I felt warmth flood my chest, but it was quickly tempered by the whispers from other staff who had witnessed my involvement. "Did you see him? He's everywhere Susan is," one nurse muttered. I clenched my fists, realizing that my heroic actions, meant only to help and protect, had now amplified suspicion. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to earn trust and be near her, I had drawn even more scrutiny. Later, in the quiet of the staff room, Susan approached me again. "John, today, you were amazing. I don't know what I would have done without you." I forced a casual smile, hiding the knot of anxiety in my stomach. "It was nothing. I just wanted to help." Her smile lingered, and for a moment, I allowed myself to imagine a life where I didn't have to hide, where she knew the truth, and we could share moments like this without fear. But the whispers outside reminded me that this was still a fragile illusion. One day, my secret could shatter everything. The following day, I arrived at the hospital with a mix of excitement and dread. Each step in my disguise felt heavier than before, the whispers and suspicious glances from staff still lingering in the air like shadows. I stepped forward to help, carrying a small tray of medical tools. "Do you need anything, Susan?" I asked quietly. She glanced at me, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Just stay close. It helps when I have someone I can trust with me." Her words, so simple, hit me harder than I expected. She trusted me, and I had no right to fully deserve it, not when I was living a lie. As we worked together, I noticed a moment of pause in her movements. Her eyes, usually so full of focus and kindness, softened as they met mine. "John," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I feel like you really see me. Not just what I do, but who I am. Not many people do that." I swallowed hard, the truth pressing against my chest. "Susan," I stopped myself. I couldn't risk saying more. "Not yet. I notice you because you matter. That's all." Her gaze lingered on me, searching, and for a fleeting second, I wondered if she could sense the depth of my feelings, if she could somehow read the walls I had built around my heart. "You're different, John. You make this hospital feel lighter," she said softly. I felt warmth flood through me, but it was accompanied by the cold realization that the staff's growing suspicion could destroy this fragile connection at any moment. The same people who watched my every move could easily misinterpret these small interactions and unravel everything I was trying to protect. By the end of the shift, I returned to the locker room, removing my disguise and staring at my reflection. The day had been a mixture of closeness and tension, hope and fear. The morning sunlight streamed through the hospital windows, but I felt a storm inside me. Today, I knew the truth could no longer be hidden. Susan's trust and closeness had grown too strong, and the whispers from staff were becoming harder to manage. I couldn't keep living this double life, not if I wanted a real chance with her. I found her in the pediatric ward, gently comforting a frightened child. I took a deep breath. "Susan, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said from the start." Her brow furrowed slightly, curiosity and concern mingling in her eyes. "What is it?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "I'm not who you think I am. I'm not just a cleaner here. My real name is John Derrick, and I'm the owner of this hospital." For a heartbeat, she didn't speak. Her eyes widened in shock, and I feared I had destroyed everything. "What?" she whispered, voice trembling. "I know it sounds unbelievable," I said quickly, my hands trembling. "I came here in disguise because I wanted to know the real you, Susan. I wanted to see if someone could care for me, not my wealth or my status. I've fallen for you. Completely." Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I searched her face for any hint of understanding, any sign that she could forgive the deception. Finally, she stepped back, tears brimming in her eyes. All this time, I trusted you, and you lied to me? Her voice cracked, a mixture of hurt and disbelief. I didn't lie to hurt you, I pleaded, taking a tentative step closer. I wanted to find someone who could see me for me, not for what I have. Susan, you are the only person I've met who sees the heart, not the fortune. I can't imagine my life without you. Her eyes softened slightly, though the hurt lingered. I don't know if I can trust you again so easily. I understand, I said earnestly. I'm asking for a chance to prove myself. Not as a billionaire, not as the hospital owner, but as the man who cares for you, who sees you, and who wants to love you with everything I have. For a long moment, she didn't respond. Then, slowly she reached out and took my hand. You're crazy, she whispered, a small smile breaking through the tears. But maybe that's why I trust you. Relief, joy, and love surged through me all at once. Susan, I promise, no more secrets. Just us from now on. She nodded, her eyes shining. Just us. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the hospital, I realized that the risk, the disguise, and the fear had all been worth it. I had found her, not the woman who loved a billionaire, but the woman who loved me. And finally, for the first time, I felt complete. Please, kindly hit the subscribe button, like this video and share. This means a lot to us. Thank you for watching.